Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the House of Footy podcast. I'm Jack Hudson, and joining me, as always, my co-host and Port Adelaide legend, Warren Tredrea. Treaders, how are you, mate?
Hello, how are you, mate? You've brought in a ring in. What's going on?
Yeah, no, this is a nice change of pace. So we've got a special guest, Anthony Alesiani. And how are you, mate?
Hello, Treaders. It's good to be on. 24 hours notice. It's great.
Now, Anne, he said change of pace. Are you quicker, or you'll make us quicker or slower? Because we ain't quick between Hutto and I.
No,
I've seen Hutto run. Don't worry, we're definitely going to be quicker.
Jesus. Can't get much slower than that. But anyway, let's just move on from that and get straight into it. Like the story of the week, footy this week, guys. The National Reserves comp, that's starting to really heat up. Port Adelaide wanting to join the VFL from the SANFL. Treaders, I'll throw to you first. How do you feel about it? Obviously, having a lot of connection with the club over time to see that move be made.
Well, I must admit, it didn't totally surprise me. It surprised me given they gave notice, and obviously that's been revealed since that in their contract with the SANFL to play in the local competition as an AFL, effectively a twos team, the Port Magpies, they had to give 12 months notice. So that makes sense from that perspective. We know there was a story leaked out. I suspect it was from people close to the club, pretty much saying that they were entertaining the option to do it. Everyone has heard who's worked in media that this has been on the agenda. I think I spoke about it 12 months ago on radio, or when I say 12 months ago, the start of the AFL season, saying now that the TV deal is extended through to year 3035, what's it, 7 years to run or something for the AFL, you look at that's the next best option. And it probably would have already happened had it been COVID hadn't hit. So you suspect from the outside, the Port Adelaide Footy Club, the Adelaide Footy Club is following. Made no mistake about that, but this is very much like Adelaide Oval. Port Adelaide are the ones that got the heritage in the SANFL. They're going to make the play, and Adelaide will follow in behind. The same too for the Western Australian clubs as well, because it hasn't really worked over there. I know Fremantle's attached to Peel Thunder. West Coast has their own twos team. I think from everyone's perspective, if you control your own destiny and work in a national reserves comp, which is the VFL, which is effectively happening anyway. You know, the Gold Coast Suns won the VFL this year. We know Broadbeach plays in it. We know GWS and Sydney are attached to it. So effectively, the only teams that are missing out are the South Australian clubs and the Western Australian clubs. So I get that. The question I have around it is competitive advantage. I know many years ago, up to 19 years ago, we won the premiership. We had all our players dictated to a mini draft at the start of every AFL drafted year. Some played for Port, some played for Central, some played for Norwood, Glenelg, South Adelaide, West Adelaide Eagles. So in the end, our development guys were watching, I think, 6 or 7 different games of football every week to follow where they're at. No doubt it's better than that, but when you've pretty much got your own destiny in the local com, I'm not sure how different it's going to be. Clearly, Port has some ideas, the club have some ideas, people inside are more aware than I would be on this. But I think if it turns into development, you're developing more players, you're working under the same system, which clearly they're trying to do in the SANFL with, this year, Hamish Hartlett will coach the SANFL team in 2024, which looks like to being the final year. This year, it was Tyson Goldsack. So it's an interesting one, and then clearly it's a club-driven agenda for developing players. And the other big discussion point going forward is also how academies work, because we saw how well the Gold Coast did. So for me, it's a tick and believe in the people of Port Adelaide to go, hey, they're seeing it better from outside. But the big question for all the Port fans will be, okay, what jumper do they wear? Can they wear the Port Magpies jumper? I know there's multiple teams who are in black and white. In the VFL, will they be able to do that? Will they be able to play games at Alberton? They're the big issues that probably the Port Adelaide people want, but really, realistically, outside of that, they just want a national reserves comp.
Does look like it could settle that Alberton is purely used for training and the AFLW base. And what's your sort of take on it, and like, as a fan watching it sort of grow over the past 10 years as a SANFL reserve side?
Yeah, I think especially it's been the last 10 years, I think there's been a lot of ideas where a reserves comp is probably a more of a better understanding of what your club can do in terms of performance-wise. And then I think, obviously with the Magpies, they've made 2 grand finals in that time in the SANFL. So it hasn't meant that we haven't had success, but failing success, I should say. But I think as a fan, you look in and it's exactly those questions: where are we going to play? What jumper are we going to wear? What does this mean for the Magpies and the heritage, and also the push for keeping that history with the club while we also move forward. And I think the big point for me that stood out was the fact that we have a reserves comp. I look back at 2004 and 5, 6, 7, like the days I started to really get into footy, and you'd be watching 7, 8, 9 different games just to see where two players are playing, see how they're going. So having that all compacted into one, I think is going to be a lot more beneficial for supporters as well.
I remember when you came back from injury, Treaders, you spent a game in the Sandford and just took the piss out of Norwood, didn't you?
I did return to play against Norwood, and I reckon it was almost the last time we've won against Norwood, so it tells you where we're going. But yeah, it's a different comp. And that night, Nick Lower, who was on our list as a halfback flanker, was forced to play full back. So it just told you the difference between the AFL and the Sandford team. But, I really enjoyed that night. It was a good night to go back and wear the old Magpies jumper. Albeit it wasn't the lace-up that I'd last played in 1997 grand final. So it was a long time later. It was 10 years later in 2007. But as Ant touched on then, I think the positive would be curtain raisers. There's no reason why you couldn't, subject to the ovals, around the country, whether here in Adelaide, it'd be at Adelaide Oval. Obviously you play 2 more games at that oval per week. They don't get damaged too hard, let's be honest. I was privileged to play at Footy Park, which I think was the best deck I played at. I played at the old Waverley when it was amazing. I played at the MCG when it was a bog. So the fact that we don't see dirt on ovals very time now, I'd suspect that, yes, Adelaide Oval's going to get trampled a bit more. I'd like to see curtain raisers return, probably not every week because it'd make it a bit more difficult and bits and pieces. But maybe if you're in a situation where you can play some games at Alberton and subject to the AFL's fixture, a Friday night fixture, you're not going to play a pre-game, for your twos players. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Maybe the TV broadcast changes. No, Maguire Media runs the VFL sample and waffle coverage. Will they then go on the next tier and it'd be broadcast both on Channel 7 as it is now, and then maybe on Foxtel? I think, the question is what that actually does to the second-tier competitions of the waffle and sample, because in their own rights, the sample is clearly the second best comp. Well, this would seriously rival it after that now. So, but the curtain raiser, used to get there as a kid and watch the twos play. I still remember when I was on the verge of being drafted in '95, ended up saying out the draft for Port, but was entertained by Collingwood to come over and watch. And Dad was a bit of a part-time recruiter in that space. Because he was working through the Teal Cup. A lot of clubs get you involved. But, we went into the change room and saw Dermot Brereton play for his 1 year against Collingwood. It was the pinchy pinch game where Jason Dunstall and Craig Kelly was pinching him. But, I remember watching the whole twos game before the AFL game, and you just saw the crowd, build. And I think that'll be a positive, but I'm not sure it'll happen every week.
God, the pinchy pinch game, that's real good. There used to be I remember it quite regularly at Footy Park. There used to be a game on before the AFL, whether it be a sample under 18s or a state under 18s or something like that. There was certainly a different sort of game as a opening sort of a curtain raiser back in your day, wasn't there?
Well, there was, but there were those talent squads, 16s, 18s. Sometimes if the national comp was held in Adelaide, which I think the majority of them have been in Melbourne ever since the last 10 or so years, but there were situations where I played in a couple of those tip-top squads, which was early days was the under-17 squads, which turned into under-18 squads, under-16 squads. Now pretty much all the curtain raisers that are played are sometimes the Port Magnies will play or the Crows will play beforehand in the sample. And/or then you've got Anzac rounds where you've got Air Force versus the Army and stuff, those sorts of things. So I think if you brought back the genuine curtain raiser of the next best, then I think that would probably roll into line.
Completely agreed. AFLW Grand Final just went by, and the venue was obviously a massive talking point. The game, terrific, seeing Brisbane get up, but a lot of fans were left out. So I think it was 13,500 at Icon Park or Princess Park. Should they have played it at Marvel? Traders?
Yeah.
Ant, one of yours?
I think they should have. Because if you're looking at how they could have played it at Marvel, stacking it, if you got 25,000 there, you could close off the top tier. They've done it before at other games, and just having it the first 2 tiers, it's still going to look I think just as pleasing to see 25,000 at Marvel than it would be 13.5 or 12.5 at Icon. But I think as well, the sentiment of having it at Princess Park and having everyone dive into a local footy ground with a bit of history. I don't know about you, Treaders, but I think that still resonated quite well with how it looked and how it panned out.
Yeah, I must admit, Anna, I think I probably lean towards the play at the old Princess Park. I get people were locked out. That's not ideal. Maybe you need to go to a bigger local ground. I'm not sure, off the top of my head. Victoria Park clearly is now like a community park. Windy Hill probably wouldn't fit that many in. It's not a huge oval. So maybe one of the VFL grounds. But what I did like about it is I thought the look was good. And I hate the look, but from TV, I think natural light certainly looks better than a dome with a roof shut. You can't leave that open. I know they persisted for like 15 years to say that it was still good for TV. But I just think that it comes back to attendance. Like what'd you say, Hutto, 13,500 people. Mm-hmm. If it got to 15 or so and you missed out 1,500 people, that's not ideal. But I think at the end of the day, the AFL needs to make a decision a fair way out, because they would have understood that the top two teams, Melbourne and Adelaide, then Melbourne second, they didn't get through, which is pretty rare in the AFLW. So the third and fourth teams played off and won the premiership. So I don't mind the fact of it. It looks really full. I love the fact that the North Melbourne senior AFL players were there supporting their team. I know Harris Andrews from Brisbane was there and supported the Ultimate Indian, which were the premiers. But I think if it continues to grow, then I think Marvel has to certainly take precedent, because you don't want to be locking people out of the game. You're still growing this brand. You're still growing this product. I think the TV product's got better. I think the level of quality of play has got better, if you remember back to that first year or 8 seasons or so ago. So big upside. And the challenge now is getting the eyeballs on it. And I think from a perspective of the weekend, TV numbers were pretty good. It looked really good. It looked really vibrant, and the game was really competitive.
Yeah, no, it was an absolute spectacle, so that was good for the AFLW comp. This week as well, stuff with Chad Wingard sort of grew a bit more legs. Obviously, Hawthorn Star was approached apparently by Collingwood late in the piece of the trade period. Bit interesting that he did raise the point of loyalty, that they wanted him to stay, and that's why he did it. And obviously out for the year with Achilles. Traders, what did you make of the sort of thought around that?
Well, I thought it was pretty convenient that he wanted to push the loyalty bit, because I remember back in the time at Port Adelaide, he was telling people privately that he training, I don't want to be here, I'll be gone in a few years. And his mates had left. Impey had left the year before, Trengove had left the year before, and I get all that. But also too, who was probably one of the youngest, most vibrant players in the comp, 2 All-Australians, Mark of the Year, best and fairest inside 22 years of age. He'd really stagnated in his career in terms of 100% professionalism. So no one can say he's not a super talent. He's an unbelievable talent. But now he faces a period of time where he's got an Achilles surgery where he won't play much in 2024. So to hang around, I get it. But clearly he's probably going to get paid a lot more money with rehab to be at Hawthorn. Yes, does he want to move? He says he doesn't. It was interesting by Collingwood, wasn't it? Jack Ginnivan out. Get all these other recruits in, and then you go, hey, we're smelling blood in the water and an opportunity, because they've pushed the preseason draft just because of their list numbers. I'd love to be in a situation where you could just incorporate the so-called rookie list, which is no longer a rookie anyway, into a total list, and then you don't have to delist players and play this one. Because the reason why Collingwood come to play is the Hugh Greenwood rule. Gold Coast said under Stuart Dew, we're going to sign you for another year. North Melbourne go, hey, we'll pay you more money and give you 2. Gone. So for me, that's the bit, it's the risk you take. I like the fact that Wingard hangs around, but if to preach loyalty, to say Port forced me out, Hawthorn wanted me, I'll stay. I think the reality is if he committed to someone and gave his word, that's what you stay and that's what you do.
What was your vibe, Ant?
Oh, I do remember that time when Wingard was rolling around at Port and saying, he even came out, I think 2 weeks before that trade period and said all the rumours are false.
Yeah. It wasn't going anywhere.
No, that's exactly right. And he did 3 things, because I remember working on radio going, hang on, they said false, Port are forcing me out. It's a mutual decision, right? He changed to. And then he said, it was my decision and I wanted out. I was like, well, yeah, I know there's games. And absolutely there's an element of Port saying, well, hey, I'm not sure they could get the best out of him anymore because he'd stagnated and wasn't wasn't playing poorly, but wasn't playing best and fairest all Australian mark of the year, those types of things. And let's face it, it is a business. But yeah, the messages were certainly inconsistent, and I thought it was the same again.
Yeah, it definitely was. I think as well, considering like you had the opportunity to go from a Hawthorn side who developing and is coming into a time where, you know, over the next 3, 4, 5 years, they might be back at the top. For a Collingwood side who, as you said, has just divulged into as many areas to get all their talents and traded in and picks in and everything, to go, hey, you want to come over? You want to come play for a premiership side? You know, I think in saying that, yeah, Wingard staying is, you know, loyalty at this time, but, you know, do you really believe the loyalty card anymore?
Well, I only believe it one way. I reckon there's loyalty from player to club.
Yep.
Right, and that's wearing out. But there's no loyalty from club to player.
Yeah.
No. That's the mark of the year, Ant. Do you remember that quite fondly?
Oh.
You're gonna bring this up because you're
what
in
happened
the
there?
Just if you Google it and you see a certain peanut with his mouth wide open, looking like
Weren't
one of those
eating
clowns at the sideshow.
Weren't eating a pie, were you?
No. If you
Who
said
was it? That was Sean Dempster, wasn't it, against St Kilda?
that,
They
yeah,
jumped on his head.
Yeah.
Poor bloke.
Been there, done that. Not a
Yeah,
good feeling.
I was going to say you were doing a bow 2 weeks in a row, weren't you, Treaders?
Oh, I did, yeah. I took a bow to the crowd in a prelim. We won through the granny in 07. Then I took a bow in the Hungry Jack's ad when Paul Chapman Paul Chapman jumped on my head. I pushed out Tom Harley. I thought I got him here, and next minute I was vertical, and Chapman. I want some royalties out of that. There's got to be something. He would have got paid to be part of that Hungry Jack's ad. If I wasn't there, he wouldn't have got up.
No.
That's the most insult to injury shit I've ever seen. That, Speaky. That was gut-wrenching. Anyway, moving on. Don't want to talk about that.
Speak for yourself. You weren't even in the mark.
Yeah, that's right. I was in the crowd looking at the wall for the final quarter. Anyway, gather round tickets. They're on sale Monday. Are we keen or are we not?
Yes, keen. Absolutely keen. You know why? To be keen for gather round is the fact that people want to go to every game, not just their own clubs. So for I think the tickets at the moment that are proposed are like your guaranteed club members get a seat in like category 3 and general admission, and you got to pay on top of that to get category 2, category 1, which is level 3 or something like that at the Adelaide Oval. They've also brought in the collective, which is basically like corporate. You'll be based around the McGarry room and having luncheons and stuff like that. I think it's like $95 per day they've brought out. So
that's your area, Treaders.
It's genuine dish liquor stuff, that is.
That's the old platters, the silver platters coming out.
How many springies or party pies and pasties can you eat for $95? That's the challenge.
Yeah, they're all fresh out of the microwave and stuff like that. So I'm keen,
particularly at Mount Barker.
From grass to grass.
Yeah. Oh yes, but gather round's going to be exciting. Like last year was awesome. Like Ant, you and I ended up on the hill for the Richmond Sydney game, quite under a certain state, which was very good. Treaders, did you get many games to gather round last year?
Yeah, I called the Port Bulldogs game. Earlier that day. I called the game between Brisbane and North Melbourne, which was good for about a quarter.
It was
out at Mount Barker. Then I obviously drove straight Adelaide over, watched the last 3 quarters of the Bombers Melbourne. Bombers beat Melbourne. Saw Adelaide on the Thursday night. So I pretty much watched most games, which is great, and that's what it's for. And if you're a footy nut, and this is the beauty that Melbourne people have got over everywhere else, over New South Wales, over Queensland, over WA and SA, is that if you're an MCC member, you can go and watch, a Friday night blockbuster between Collingwood and Carlton if you're an Essendon fan. You know what? You just want to watch good footy, and that's the beauty that you get. And this is where a great thing for probably the next 2 years. So a total of 3-year contract, South Australian government and the Premier, Peter Malinauskas, has splashed out his checkbook, and I think it's a wonderful thing. Gather round, and I think it'll work, and probably work in Perth. How it will work in Sydney, not sure. How it'll work in Brisbane? Well, clearly it won't work in Brisbane for a while because obviously the Gabba is going to be uprooted for the Olympics. But I think it's a wonderful thing, and if you get along to as many games as possible, it's a good thing.
So like there was a few different like footy names roaming around, like people getting heckled. I'm pretty sure I saw Tony Jones cop the old chompers from a group of drunk people. Billy Brownell strolled into the Adelaide Casino at 12 a.m. after the Port game. Traders, did you mingle around with the crowd much when you were there? Would you cop any heckles, or what'd you cop while you were roaming around?
Mate, I didn't cop anything, and I'm smart the way I go about it. I don't go to an Adelaide and Carlton game. Why would I put myself at risk?
Jeez.
But mind you, Crows fans are normally pretty good. And 99% of footy fans, and that's what I loved about it. Hey, mate, yeah, how you going? Good luck to your team. I'm in town from Bunbury. I'm in town from Brisbane. I've flown in from Tassie. All people who, and that's what the government wanted. People come from other areas, but there's always those 1% flogs. But yeah, the positive was, instead of your broadcasters plunking their bum in a studio in Melbourne going, welcome to Gather Round, broadcast live from Melbourne into Adelaide, from Adelaide type thing. You talk about Tony Jones, the Sunday Footy Show was in town. Foxtel did all their shows from in town. I think there was a real, behind the scenes, this is a little bit of info for you, there was a real kick up as to who got where. So, Triple M and 3AW flew their people in to call the footy. They might have had the height, you know what I mean? Channel 7 had the new casino hotel, so they booked out their rooms there. My information suggested Fox Sports got one of the Chancellor hotels, which might be okay, but I heard that there was a big discussion between because a lot of those guys who work in TV work across the radio broadcast too. So there was a lot of bitching and moaning who got the old Kent Road of the cheap Adelaide hotels. And the blokes who got Mayfair, they were bragging their butts off.
Oh God, it's a lot better now. Like the Sky City one looks amazing. The Oval Hotels.
That was booked out quick. That was very well booked out quick. And also too, you had the AFL who booked out. I think too, if you go back and remember the stories that the Hotels Association were cracking their shits, and everyone's like, God, how much more can this mob whinge? But apparently the AFL had bought all the hotel rooms for $300 a pop and was selling them for $1,200 with a breakfast for all their sponsors. So that's where there was word around that they took the risk, and then all of a sudden the price just went through the roof. Because remember too that all the tickets were offered. You could go to every game or to do the lock-ins, and you could do all the functions. And by the end of it, people were pretty well catered out, so to speak.
Yeah, gee whiz. Like a few of our friends went over and stayed in. There's 3 of them in a room that was probably as wide as my kitchen table.
Yeah,
like that because they booked it. I think 2 weeks before Gather Round Day.
Yeah.
And one level
saw the room,
and one level above Red Square nightclub too. So when you did go to bed, you didn't sleep anyway.
Reds!
Oh
What a
boy.
time! Gee whiz, move on from Reds real quick. Few re-signings this week and a few to come. Zach Butters and Willem Drew both at Port Adelaide. And we're expecting Connor Rosie to extend long-term soon. Across the comp, Hugh McCluggage, Brisbane have been working on for quite a while, and Aaron Cadman at the Giants too. So who's going to be the next to drop, do you reckon? Like the big name off sort of the out-of-contract list, and maybe a youngster extending for a bit longer?
Well, I think Rosie's word around town is that Rosie would do a massive deal, and Butters would have done a massive deal if he wanted the tenure that we're hearing. There's a rumour around 7-year deal, and Port aren't exactly too quiet with those sorts of things because there's sort of enough excitement around the place to suggest that they know something's big coming. And historically, you boys, obviously Port fans, but you sit there and go, well, every Christmas they try and roll out re-signings, don't they? They try and roll out that 4 days of Christmas or 5 days leading into Christmas and gets the fans excited. And that's all part of content and obviously the excitement. But this is the time to strike. Like we'll probably have an upcoming House of Footy episode focusing on who are the free agents for 2024 or the pre-free agents for 2025. So McCluggage is the best on that list. Obviously, Tim English not far behind, being the All-Australian ruckman at the Dogs. We saw Norton get signed for a 9-year deal. I think it was an 8 or 9-year extension, which was just huge money. So this is the time that the clubs go, hey, we don't want them into free agency. Brisbane don't want McCluggage to enter free agency, and even to a stage that they actually spoke about trade week, they're in they're in actual discussion. So I suspect if he gets tipped over and signs, it'll be announced before the season starts. geez, you'd be concerned if he didn't sign before the start of the season. If you're going to run down the gauntlet towards free agency, the longer it goes, the more chance you are to leave. But, this is the time for signatures. You're just getting fit. You don't have to worry about form. And if you could lock it away before round one, then that'd be huge. And boys, from your perspective, we're all fans of footy. You want to see your club moving hard, don't you?
Yep.
You don't mind.
I love it. I love the build up, the 12 days of Christmas. They'll throw in a voucher for fans. They'll throw in a getaway, and then you just throw in a 10-year deal for Connor Rozee, for example. Like, it's just
how far would you go? How far do you reckon you could go with him? There's a lot of criticism around how far you go on certain, like Aaron Norton, 8 or 9 year deal. Wow, like for a bloke who probably hasn't hit his straps consistently, but you go on a bloke like you say a Connor Rozee or Hugh McCluggage, multiple Australian, best and fairest winners, really durable, and in that 24 to 26 age bracket, you'd be comfortable, wouldn't you, going long term? And how far would you go before it becomes a risk?
The other thing is, like, how much of those contracts are protected? Like, so say you suffer an absolute career-ending injury in some sort of freak accident, what happens? Like,
you're covered, mate. You're covered. Depends what the clauses say. Like, you can do anything. You could say, I want a 2 year plus 2 year plus 2 year, provided I hit these triggers. Or you can just do an uncompromised 8 year deal, 7 year deal, 9 year deal. And like anyone, you get injured in the workplace, you're covered. Obviously, You couldn't hit game triggers because you're not playing.
Yeah.
But there's been many situations where people have gone long term and it's just bitten them in the butt. And I still remember the long story he's a superstar, right? One of the best players. I thought was the best inside mid I played against, all right? And that was Michael Voss. And Michael Voss played his last year of football, which I think the 2005 year, and he was still being paid as the highest player at Brisbane in 2006 when he sat in the Channel 10 commentary box because they owed him money because they kept pushing money back so they didn't blow the salary cap. So he stayed enlisted. So there's all those types of things. And his body had been broken by then.
Yeah, so that's funny how that works.
Is the Connor Rozee thing sort of like, well, he goes 7-8 years, there's a clause for the first 5, but then there's captaincy involved as well, do you reckon?
Yeah, no, I think and this is just a personal point of view, I've never heard of captaincy being put as part of a deal. I heard some rumours around Adelaide many years ago and Rory Sloane getting it. I don't know if that's true. He categorically denied it, but really prickled up in a press conference. I remember someone asked him that. I thought, oh, hang on. She's really crack up unless it could have some legs to it. Who knows? But ultimately, I think if any club says, hey, we're making a decision on your contract and we're putting in captaincy, there's no way. And also, too, this thought that captains will earn more money. Well, there is that ASA, Additional Services Agreement. Let's face it, if pick someone, Buddy Franklin in his best, Wayne Keir in his best, Connor Rozee in his best. If you're a marquee player, then you're getting the maximum ASA part of the component of the agreement. So most managers will manage and go, hey, what's the total fee? Yes, we can put some into marketing so that, for example, if who was at Volkswagen at Sydney when Buddy Franklin was there needs a marketing campaign face of someone to use his image, then that can be, it gets worked off that way.
Right.
But yeah, at the end of the day, you're still going to get what your market rate is being paid, and then commercially, whatever deals you do with boot deals and sponsorships outside of that, you'd be remunerated as well.
Quick little insight there. So in all, I'd be chuffed with Rozee for a 7-year deal. I think it would be a great result. I do have those fears about those long-term contracts because more often than not, they have blown up in clubs' faces, and I'd hate to see a situation where Port are all of a sudden in a rebuild and decide they're going to trade Connor Rozee out for a future 3rd-round pick because they're up shit creek without a paddle.
3rd-round pick, future.
Mate, look, it's a classic example, isn't it? Like, you looked at, we saw it historically recently, Brodie Grundy. Brodie Grundy was the highest paid player. It was a 5-year extension, 6-year deal, I think, in total, $1 million roundabouts a year, so we say. And Jill Copeland, when a dual Australian all of a sudden struggles in the first year in COVID, then gets traded out because the salary cap's blowing. The same thing happened to Treloar, same thing happened to Phillips at the time. They've made some really tough calls, and all of a sudden there's a fire sale and he's off to Melbourne, where Collingwood are paying about $300,000 of his salary. And 600,000 has been picked up for Melbourne. They get him for a second-round pick for an dual All-Australian ruckman. And now that didn't work, and now we're seeing the same deal effectively. Collingwood still on the hook, Melbourne off the hook, and then he arrives as a number one pick and a boom recruit in Sydney. Yeah. So it's all about management, and like anything, you got to get a long term to lock these guys away, because that's what free agency does and gives players more control. But on the other side of it, you just look at those two examples. If you've got a state-based player like a Rosie or back in the day a Warren Tredrea, the likelihood is they're less likely to be a flight risk because their family and friends are here and or girlfriend are here than an interstate kid, particularly a Victoria Metro kid.
That makes sense. All the clubs are back pre-season training. Did you, like Tredders as a player, obviously, did you sort of dread it? The coming back after your little break going, I'm going to get thrashed on this Monday?
I used to do a bucket load of training in the break, provided I wasn't carrying a niggle or post-surgery. So one year I reckon I did 50 training sessions in 70 days or 60 days or something.
Jesus.
So I'd get back wanting to improve. And that's the only time, but boys, that it sounds ridiculous, which I was a little bit OCD with training in the off-season. But when I said those sessions, it'd be a swim or a ride. It'd be a fartlek run on a beach at Queensland when you're away on holiday, or trying to run in the streets of London. So you sort of walk one day, or soft run one day, real hard one day, day off, and then you walk it around doing all the hotel thing. So professionalism doesn't flick off just because you're on holidays anymore. And and the Adelaide Crows are a classic example. Through Darren Burgess, the Crows, 93% of blokes broke their personal best 1K time trial day one pre-season. So that says to me the maturity and the professionalism of a player nowadays is far and away better than it was in my generation. And I finished in 2010. Like, I did the work in the break to get better, get stronger, but not compromise injury or go too far, but more importantly, your mind. Because I think the biggest break, if you've got no injuries, the biggest break you need is a mental break. If you can get away on holiday and train and stay fit, it is a hell of a lot easier than what I saw some of my teammates who are in the fat club, overweight, carrying a backpack with 20 kilos in their backpack. Andrew Russell used to make them put weights in there. If you're 5 kilo overweight, have a 5 kilo dumbbell in or a plate of weights in your backpack, and you're walking up Mount Lofty. They soon didn't come back fatter. So I think that's the real key. Players are a lot better prepared to get ahead, because this is the time to get ahead. This is the time to get better. You can't say, hey, once pre-season starts, everyone's training. They're all doing similar. But it's, you can change your body shape. You can change your eating attitude. You can change your mental capacity in the off-season. And that's what we're seeing. If, for example, so many Crows came back and played and trained so well.
Well, I heard as well.
I feel like it's a bit different for you, isn't it, Ant?
Yeah. We started a couple of weeks ago, and a light jog will do me, I reckon.
That's all right. What were you going to say, Ant?
I was just going to say that the Crows, the 93% that hit their PBs, apparently they were offered an ultimatum that if they didn't do a PB, they'd have to train the last session of the day. But if you did it, you're going home. Yeah,
that's right. There was a whisper around that they were doing 5 1Ks, and on the third one, they said if you break your PB, don't do the next 2. So I wonder how hard they went in the first 2. Because it was only like 5 minutes break between each. And being the skeptic and being the old media man is, okay, who's the 7% with the fatties who didn't get anywhere near it? Tell us who they are. Huh?
God.
Yeah. Who's that one that's carrying a spare tyre around his guts?
Yeah. I tell you what, that's me at Sposs. I'm the 7% at the moment.
That's me at home.
Yeah, well, that's me now.
Look at us, we're all washed.
Yeah.
Michelin.
Yeah. Keeping on track, Watch. There's been a few injuries though. Harley Reid injured, which God, West Coast fans, man.
Is that an injury though?
Oh, either that, it's a blow up. It's one of those pre-season ones where
I'm in a self-reflection, because I worked in the newsroom for 8 years. I followed everything, and whatever sneezes is a story or not. And then I never did the journo rounds, but as a presenter, you sort of saw it all, and you sort of look for angles. But the Western Australian media, I talk about South Australian media full on. Right, West Australian media. Oh my God!
Oh yeah,
this
nuts.
bloke leans over to tie up his shoelace, and it's a lead story. Or he might have a tight hammy, or the physio's just giving him, a Panadol or something for a headache or a cramp tablet, and it's a lead story. Shit, you got more to think about than that, haven't you?
I think I saw a post that 12 days in a row he was either front or back page of the
Yeah.
West Australian. Imagine being a
Leeds-
Freo fan, man.
Harley Reid farts exclusive.
The poor
Did you
kid's got
see-
some pressure on him.
Did you see the size of that ice pack though?
Yeah,
That was
sizable.
that's like your head, Hutto. Like that's huge.
Yeah, there was a double
well-
page spread in the West Australian just on the ice pack and exclusive interview.
But unlike Hutto's head, ice melts. So it's going to melt. And if it's doing its job, you want it to melt it all the way down. But you know what? The kid's a talent. But, yeah, and I hope he plays 10, 15 games this year, even if they protect him with the sub and bits and pieces. But his biggest challenge will be how his body copes. You know, and we saw it, you know, many years ago, Dersma, Rosie Butters. You know, they all had moments where they hit form and then they got tired and then may have been rested and all that. And, you know, you see it with probably didn't see it with Nick Dacos, did we? But, you know, you saw it with young Josh Dacos. You saw it with all the best young players, McCluggage, when he was growing up. You know, this is something pretty big. You know, Dustin Martin being concussed. Well, let's face it, from day one, it was almost like when I was playing, they started running early days, doing time trials, doing your testing, and then introduced kicking. Well, they pretty much do full kicking from day one. So the days of separating weights, running, skills, a lot of it is weights and sort of Pilates yoga, you know, prevention / strengthening. And then on the other time, your running's incorporated via GPS and your live tracking data anyway. So they had a catapult system. They got all new different types of systems. Now everyone's GPSed. I remember when I first started, it was about 10 guys to get GPSed. And now every player's GPSed. It picks up heart rate, picks up recovery zones, all those sorts of stuff. So that's one. But the big one, Daniel McStay, you miss out in the grand final from a medial knee. Now you have effectively a first week back training full time. You go out to Old Vic Park and you snap your cruciate. Wow.
Yeah, sad.
Yeah, it's rough.
Heartbreaking story.
That's not fun. Like in the slightest. Like poor bloke. Like, but it's an opportunity for somebody else now.
Yeah.
And Billy Frampton obviously took that opportunity in the grand final by playing a role on Harris Andrews. But it's definitely a role free and even less spot for Collingwood for someone to come through.
Yeah, and perspective, he's still earning 600. So but it's heartbreaking for him because everything for him would have been redemption. Missed out, and he played really well in that prelim. I think 2 or 3 goals and got Collingwood into a position early on where he was their best forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's just sad, isn't it? You know, and there's also too like we're going to have paralysis by analysis this time of year. Brendan Maynard shoulder recon won't be back until contact in January. Jamie Elliott shoulder clean out. But the big one's Dom Sheed, boys, in a moon boot again with a hot spot in his foot. Well, he missed the last month of last season with a similar injury. I'm not sure if it's the same leg. Only played 15 games, and the year before only played 1 game. So, geez, he is probably part and parcel of the Eagles' challenges with injuries.
That's a bloody shame, honestly, with Sheedy. Like he's that one game in 2022 to play 15 games and have really mixed form as well. Like it's tough. Like you'd hate to be a West Coast fan right now.
Well, you've got the perspective of you've gained Harley Reid, and then all of a sudden his career's over with a corky, and then you've gone Dom Sheed, who gets he's in a mood boot again. Only playing 15 games last year, as you said, Hodo. One of those games was the 3-voter against Collingwood in the pumping and at Optus. So he hasn't had a good run since 2019. I think he played every game after the grand final, and I think if you want consistency at West Coast and that rebuild phase to keep going, you want players like Sheed out there. And every time he does play, he's one of their better ones, but just can't stay on the park long enough.
Yeah, and that's you make a good point there because I've just you look at Kelly, best and fairest player, playing probably their best midfielder at the moment. West Coast fans are going to need Dom Sheed up and about because that'll make Harley Reid better quicker, if that makes sense. Because if Harley Reid, I remember Chris Judd as a kid. I reckon he's played about 5 games at half forward and you thought, this guy's a talent. He went in the midfield. But I don't want to downplay him as a superstar, but he also got into a midfield with an already established Ben Cousins and Kerr and Embley and Braun. So he wasn't the main man. But if Reid takes off and goes really well, which he could because he's a super talent, he could find himself either being tagged round 1. You know what I mean? Like, I know that's probably not going to happen because Kelly would be in front, but you need a Sheed. We saw Shuey retire, Nat Nui retire. So they've lost an amazing amount of talent and superstar players whose bodies have sort of, father time caught up with them. But yeah, as I said, for every bit of Reed's development, for him to jump out of the blocks, he's going to need those senior players around him to help him and educate him, because I don't care what anyone says, you can come out of the 18s as a talent, but they don't tag in the 18s. You're coming up against bigger bodies, more physical bodies, better skills, fitter, stronger, faster, and in the tactic side of the game.
Coming up against round one as well, Rosie, Butters, Wines, Drew. Drew will probably tag him. 4-year deal, first game.
Imagine that you roll the first game, Willem Drew rolls up to you.
Mate, I still remember Jared Schofield back in the day going, every time we played against West Coast, Mick Moreland, he was from West Coast and Port, but Mick Malthouse tagged him. He's like, man, we got Peter Burgon, we got Gavin Wanganeen, we got Roger James, we've got superstar inside Josh Franco, Nick Stevens. He goes, yeah, and I play wing, and he tagged me because he traded me and I wanted to leave. So he thought, stuff you, I'm going to sit someone on you the whole time.
That's the ultimate petty act, isn't it? That's amazing. Just tag the winger. Stop that, Scully. Jesus. But so we saw years ago Jack Watts make his debut against Collingwood, just get absolutely poleaxed by about 15 blokes for his first thing. Do you reckon Port do that and just put the pressure on the kids straight away, or will that just rev up West Coast right from the get-go?
I think that's
old school.
I think with those types of things, you're going to make them earn it. Like, if you're Port, right, or you're a team that's potentially should be playing top 8 and are pushing. Obviously, you look at what Port's done with the off-season with Radicalea and the like. Zerk Thatcher brought in, they're topped up, right? So they're chasing a better finish than where they finish. Reality is, if you're Collingwood, you're coming up against these young teams. You're going to physically take it up to them. So does that mean you target a kid? I think targeting a kid's pretty cheap. But what Collingwood did that day is they tackled him really hard and made him earn the ball, and they put pressure on him. So do you pick the easy target? Not necessarily. But imagine if you go the major target, their best midfielder, and put Kelly away, then that puts more pressure on the others. So I just think it's all a byproduct of being a super competitive outfit. So take away the team and or Port. You don't pick on kids. I think that's a bit poor. But hey, if those kids are gobbing off, or and there's 4 or 5 who are taking it up to you, it's a battle of the titans, you know what I mean? It sounds a bit pathetic, but it's like, well, you want to stamp your territory, we'll stamp ours. And that's what anyone does. That's what LeBron James does in the NBA. Steph Curry, people want to stay, I can stop you, so he shoots it from further out. You know what I mean? And still hits and say, try and stop me. It's a game of mental bluff than it is even sometimes more physical. And that's the game that you can win, the mental side.
That's probably the interesting thing that happened with the Watts situation, is that Melbourne were probably a mentally weak club at that point as well. So that probably wouldn't have helped either. Yeah,
and they didn't have strong leaders.
No.
But whereas I think by memory, Maxwell was the captain of Collingwood who went him, tackled him hard and then made him earn it. And then Melbourne hang on. Melbourne sort of fly the flag because this young kid's got tackled. But everyone remembers it's Jack Watts gets cleaned up. Well, that's where you got to be ready when you pick a kid to play in his debut. He's got to be ready to go because he can damage confidence in bits and pieces.
Yeah. Well, we're going to end the pod with some rapid fire questions. Treaders, I'll go to you first. Which player or players at their new club are you most looking forward to watching, and why?
Brodie Grundy, Sydney Swans. I think they've gone all in, and not just him, but with Adams, Hamblin, Jordan. I think they did really well in the off-season. But he is the best ruckman in the comp on his day.
Yeah,
we haven't seen his day for 2 years. I want to see how he goes. There's big pressure on him. And I think he'll make the Swans better. So as an independent, I like watching him and Warner, Warner and all their midfielders. Mills, obviously his Mad Monday decision is not going to help his preparation, but they do bat deep, Golden, these types of players, superstar players. You throw in Grundy, I think it's exciting if you're a Swans fan. So from an independent on the outside, they're the ones I'm looking at.
And
Lockie Schultz for me, going from Freo to Collingwood. You talk about, exciting talents and how much this guy's been able to sort of bring a bit of culture with him at Freo, and then all of a sudden He's gone and gone to the biggest powerhouse in the comp. I want to see how he does in a good quality side, because obviously Freo have been up and down over the last however long, and he's started to find his way. So coming into a side with, the likes of Hill and no more Ginnivan, but their outfit down forward, I think him down there is going to really improve them. So I just want to see how he does on the big stage in front of 80, 90,000 at the G. Be another Lockie Schultz type that just comes in and dominates.
Well, I'm just going to ask you this question, but you've already answered. So you reckon they'll be better? Their list looks better and their forward line looks better. I agree. How do you feel for Peter Bell and the Dockers, who effectively had him on rolling 1-year deals and this time hit a trigger and they couldn't pay him what he was worth?
Well, I hope they've got a long-term fix, Peter Bell and the Dockers, because at the moment I don't think they're going to look too great going into 2024. But we've seen teams surprise. Then they've got Brandon Walker, who could come back and play a part, so you never know.
And a sensational midfielder who had a down year. You look at Brayshaw and Sarong and the big fella on the ruck and Jackson.
Jai miss.
Yeah, they got seriously a talented team. Hutto, who do you like? Which club and why?
I'll stick somewhat relatively close to home. But Essendon and Xavier Dersma. That boy is going to love the Marvel Stadium deck. And
Bombers make finals?
Oh, I'll have to think about it. I can't, off the top of my head, I say no.
A typical host.
We won't replay this.
Oh, yeah. Evidence.
Just keep saying yes, so you have 14 in your 8.
There you go.
So can you tell me how Dersma was close to home, considering he's now at Windy Hill?
Because he used to play for Port, obviously, mate. Well done.
You're not happy about that trade, are you?
It's not that I'm unhappy about it. It's more just it sucks because like him, Rosie, and Butters rule the future, all the combinations. Look at you laughing. This is
well. You said I'm not happy, but it sucks.
This is why I'm host. It sucks. I think Essendon are getting a great bloody talent, and it's going to help them much more.
Hey, mate, you know this was quick fire. You've given us 6 minutes on one bloke.
All right, Dersma, Essendon. There you go. Happy?
All you've done is just put fire in that question. Yeah. Now he's stirred up.
Christ.
Yeah, he's a bit
rattled. Yeah.
The steam's coming out.
Thanks, Peanuts. All right, that's all we've got for this week's pod. Thanks for joining us. Like, subscribe, all that jazz, and we'll see you next week.